work together.
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi has secured a decisive snap election victory after her LDP alliance taking 352 of 465 seats. She now faces challenges on debt, inflation and defense policies. Hong Kong court sentenced pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai to 20 years in prison for foreign collusion and sedition. Rights groups say the ruling marks another blow to Hong Kong's freedoms. Thailand's Conservative Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul has declared victory after TV projection showed his party winning the most parliamentary seats by a wide margin, while Anutin said the result belonged to all Thais regardless of how they voted. The U.S. envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, held a phone call with Kurdistan Democratic Party President Masoud Barzani to discuss Syria and regional politics, with both sides stressing the need to prevent escalation and work towards lasting stability. This is seen as a key step towards Syria's unity and restoring state authority. Syria's Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shaibani and Intelligence Chief Hussein al-Salama are in Riyadh to participate in talks at the Global Coalition to defeat ISIS. They were hosted by Saudi Deputy Foreign Minister Walid bin Abdul Karim al-Khuraiji, marking a high-level security meeting hosted by Saudi Arabia. Two South Korean Army crew members were killed after an AH-1S Cobra attack helicopter crashed during a training flight shortly after 11 a.m. local time. Now the military has suspended all AH-1S operations and launched an emergency investigation into the cause of the crash, which remains unknown for now. Venezuelan opposition figure Juan Pablo Guinipa, a close ally of Maria Corina Machado, was kidnapped in Caracas shortly after his release from prison yesterday. Guinipa had been detained for more than 8 months in politically motivated charges and was released, with his abduction raising new concerns. SpaceX Crew 12 astronauts have reached Cape Canaveral ahead of their ISS launch, calling the mission very real and a symbol of international cooperation. Now for this hour, we start with China on Jimmy Lai. China has defended the sentencing of Hong Kong tycoon Jimmy Lai, saying he is a Chinese citizen who deserved to be severely punished under the law. The Foreign Ministry has emphasized that Hong Kong's judicial authorities acted in accordance with the law. Beijing reiterated its full support for Hong Kong in safeguarding national security. Officials said Lai's punishment reflects the legal responsibilities of all citizens. The comments come after international calls for his release on humanitarian grounds. Let's listen in.
香港是法治社会，特区司法机关依法履职尽责，维护法律权威，捍卫国家安全，合情、合理、合法，不容置喙。
Now we welcome Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi. He's a former advisor to late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Taniguchi, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, thank you. Now looking at this, how does this sentencing reshape the international perception of Hong Kong's autonomy and the credibility of the China's stance towards, or the China's call of, one country, two systems framework towards Hong Kong?
I think it's by now common knowledge the two systems, one state, two systems system, if yes, the name deserves, is long gone. Hong Kong today is just a pale shadow of itself. Freedom of all kinds is being annihilated. And I think it's a clarion call to the people in Taiwan, and by extension people in Japan, that if Taiwan falls under the so-called two systems system, a similar thing will happen to them sooner rather than later. And if Taiwan gets annexed by China, the strategic space and space for discourse for Japan will likely be equally squeezed.
Right. And also today we saw Taiwan responded rather forcefully to this ruling. So how does Lai's case factor into Taiwan's own political messaging and security narrative towards wish-a-wish China?
Taiwan must broaden its space for discourse as much as possible by acting not alone by itself, but by engaging as many stakeholders as possible, including perhaps NGOs and the like of countries such as Japan.
Right. With that, I'd like to thank Dr. Taniguchi for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this news. Now, the UK has called for Hong Kong tycoon Jimmy Lai's release, describing his 20-year jail term as tantamount to a life sentence. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper has said Lai's persecution is politically motivated, targeting his exercise of free expression. She has criticized Beijing's national security law for silencing critics. Cooper has added the UK will rapidly engage further with Chinese authorities on the case and urged Hong Kong to end Lai's ordeal on humanitarian grounds, allowing him to reunite with his family. Now we welcome back Dr. Taniguchi for this discussion. Dr. Taniguchi, thank you very much for staying with us. Now, although British Foreign Ministry Secretary has raised alarms and many across the world has raised eyebrows towards this move, but on Jimmy Lai, what practical impact, if any, does this have on China's relations with Western governments and regional actors who have raised eyebrows towards this? Does it change anything, them condemning such?
Sadly and realistically speaking, very little. They are not going to affect the thinking process, mindset, the landscape they're looking at very much. And China now views itself as a supreme power, looking down upon all those nations, including Japan, including Britain, and including many other countries, with the exception only of the United States. So I'm not so much optimistic as to the effect of those statements.
And last but not least, what legacy does Mr. Jimmy Lai leave behind, as he will be in prison?
So long as he stays in prison and he stays alive, his legacy is going to be revisited again and over again by freedom-loving peoples. Those young people in Hong Kong and Taiwan and elsewhere.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Taniguchi for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now, looking at China and Japan, China has urged Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi to withdraw her remarks on Taiwan once again, following her victory in Japan's snap elections. Takaichi's statement in November that a Chinese naval blockade of Taiwan would pose a survival-threatening situation for Japan, potentially prompting collective self-defense, has drawn strong criticism from Beijing. In retaliation, China has imposed trade restrictions and curtailed tourism to Japan. Despite these measures, Takaichi's comments have not been retracted, with her party reaffirming her stance as a clear expression of Japan's position. Diplomatic relations between Japan and China remain tense as both sides stand firm on their positions. Now we welcome back Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi for this discussion. He joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Taniguchi, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, before Takaichi made such remarks towards China and on issue of Taiwan, a lot of political leaders, including the leaders from LDP, have sustained more neutral or have avoided being so strong or firm in their stance towards China and Taiwan. What do you think is changing in political landscape among Japanese politicians, and also what is changing among Japanese citizens, the voters, that has led to this, and how is the support like for now?
Ms. Takaichi called a spade a spade.
Yes.
The phenomenon itself has long been known to many in the region and beyond. The fact that Chinese military assault is becoming a daily phenomenon, squeezing the strategic space of Taiwan. They are almost daily exercising coercive diplomacy towards Japan. Hardly a day goes by without Japan looking at invading incoming vessels from the Chinese authority, such being the reality. And Takaichi's remarks were based on two premises. One, military power is being used to coercively assault Taiwan. Two, in response, the United States forces are already involved. And on those two premises, there may be a situation where Japan thinks very hard to work in tandem not with Taiwan, this is an important point, but with the US forces. The Chinese authority has chosen to simplify all these technicalities and complexities, and dubbing that Japan is violating some of those principles that they deem important. Now, Foreign Ministry of China is making the same remark, indicative that there has been no recalibration process going on after Takaichi's astounding victory. I think Xi Jinping himself is giving a second thought to how to deal with this prime minister, Japan's prime minister, who has gotten relatively substantially strong and who is going to be here and stay for quite some time.
And how is the support like among voters or among Japanese citizens for her and the LDP, and also the coalition, between Ishin and LDP?
The campaign that just ended yesterday,
yes,
to choose Japan's new government, a new prime minister, has focused pretty much on Japan's national security. Takaichi is running on that campaign together with his colleague, who is defense minister, Shinjiro Koizumi. They have not been shy on speaking about what is going on out there in reality. So the nation is alarmed, and people have come to terms with the impending danger that Japan is almost daily faced with, and it's still within the memories of many people that Chinese naval vessels targeted with their shooting radars some of the Japanese fighter aircraft. So envelope, so to say, is being pushed daily from the Chinese side to Taiwan, to Japan, to the region, and that much has been well understood and digested by Japan. It does not mean, this is an important caveat, that many people are panicking. In order for them not to panic, they wanted to put a stronger prime minister in place.
With that, I'd like to thank Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi for joining us and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to China. Chinese regulators have advised financial institutions to curb their exposure to U.S. Treasuries, citing concerns over concentration risks and market volatility. Officials urged banks to limit new purchases of U.S. government bonds and told institutions with heavy exposure to reduce their holdings. The guidance applies to commercial and financial institutions, but does not affect China's state-owned holdings of U.S. Treasuries. The move signals Beijing's cautious approach to managing financial risk amid uncertain global market conditions. Now we welcome Dr. AJ Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, joins us live from Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Dua, for joining us today. Thank you. Now, what strategic message is China sending by instructing its banks to do this? And is this more a symbolic or economically substantive move? What do you think?
I think this is an ongoing move. They have only reiterated what has been happening for the last 9 months. If you look at the holdings of the Chinese holding of the US Treasury bonds, it is the lowest currently at about 682 billion US dollars. Since 2008, Chinese have been gradually reducing their holdings of US Treasury bonds and have been using it, if I can use the word, where they seem to have weaponized even their capital, their holdings of overseas bonds. And I say this because the adverse impact of their constantly reducing their holdings in the US Treasury, which not very long ago were almost double of it at $1.2 trillion, is now down to 682 as of December end. The reason is the Chinese realize that the US has a huge debt, and the debt is almost $35 trillion. About 20% of it has to be serviced in 2 or 3 months' time from now. And if the big bondholders do not support it, the weakening of the dollar is inevitable, further weakening of the dollar. And once the dollar weakens, then all kinds of things start off in the US. The imports will become costlier, and US, as you know, lives on imports, thrives on those, even though they are now levying tariffs on it. Second, there will be inflation in the US. And third, certain bonds have to be returned in the US denominated currency only. So all those the burden upon the US if the Chinese keep on bringing it further down would be that their overall debt level increases, inflation comes in, as well as their imports become costlier with the dollar becoming weaker. So I am afraid that the US economy could take a major hit, much more than it did when it started off only so-called Liberation Day, when the tariffs got imposed on the rest of the world.
Thank you for highlighting that. And so what risks does China and US both face by this move?
Since Chinese should also realize that they may not have borrowed heavily abroad, but the Chinese GDP, the debt GDP ratio is pretty high. It is as high as 300% is the Chinese debt of its own GDP. The US debt comes out higher at 400%, and despite the US GDP being almost twice the level of the Chinese. So the US has huge debt in absolute terms, but China is not insulated altogether. Unless the Chinese economy grows and the fiscal requirement of the government to hasten the pace of the growth comes down, it gets left to the open market and the foreign investment coming in. Both the US and China, with their huge debts, and they are number 1 and number 2 size countries, with number 3, number 4, Germany, Japan, India, being in that order later on. We could all feel the pinch of their own currencies weakening, and I would think that the sooner there is an orderliness brought about in their internal debts and the foreign holdings, and the IMF may have to play some role in it, not that it can be very effective, because the levels of borrowings which we are talking of are humongous, far more than what the IMF can even manage.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. AJ Dua for joining us today and sharing that insight with us. Thank you very much. Now we move on to U.S. A third impeachment case has filed against Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte, which accuses her of misappropriating at least $10 million of taxpayer money during her time as Vice President and Secretary of Education. The new case comes after the country's Supreme Court threw out a previous impeachment complaint against her last year, noting procedural issues. The latest complaint was filed by Reverend Joselito Sarabia and others who were also behind the first case. Supporters of the complaint also bring into account an alleged death threat that was made against President Ferdinando Marcos during a late-night press briefing, a claim that Duterte has denied and explained as a misunderstanding. Opposition figure Representative Leila de Lima, who endorsed the new complaint, expressed confidence that the latest complaint would advance to a House vote. De Lima had been jailed for over 6 years on drug charges, which she and rights group claim were fabricated by the Duterte family. De Lima is now hopeful this impeachment case will proceed further than the previous ones. Now we move on to Russia. Russian authorities say they have uncovered what they describe as a Ukrainian-linked plot to assassinating one of Moscow's most senior military intelligence officers. Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, have detained 2 men in connection with Friday's shooting of Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev. The FSB claims the detainees have told investigators that they acted on orders from Ukraine Security Service, the SBU. Alexeyev, deputy head of Russia's GRU military intelligence, was critically wounded in the attack, but he has since regained consciousness following surgery. According to the FSB, the suspected shooter, who is a Ukrainian-born Russian citizen extradited from Dubai, and an alleged accomplice, both of them were questioned in Russia. They have reportedly admitted involvement and provided details tying the operation to Ukraine's SBU. The FSB further claimed that Polish intelligence played a role in the recruitment, though neither Warsaw or Kyiv has publicly confirmed any involvement. Meanwhile, Ukraine has categorically denied participating in the assassination attempt, and there has been no independent verification of the FSB's claims. Now we welcome Dr. Gilbert Doctorow. He's Russian affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much, Dr. Doctorow, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, what are we to make of these latest statements connecting, Russia, connecting the latest shooting from Friday to Ukraine?
I think that the Russians want to make a strong case for furthering their destruction of Ukrainian infrastructure. Ukraine is a very good target. However, as I've said yesterday in my commentary on this assassination attempt, I don't believe that Ukraine was acting alone, and perhaps Mr. Zelensky is correct. It wasn't even responsible for what was done by Ukrainians on the direction of another country, the other country being Great Britain. The Russians are not going to divulge anything about possible involvement of other countries because they don't want to widen the conflict and distract themselves from their immediate task of destroying the defense capabilities of Ukraine and forcing a capitulation.
Yes.
What is remarkable in this case is just how quickly the FSB was able to identify the assailant and to proceed in cooperation with United Arab Emirates in his detention and then his being delivered back to Moscow. That is extraordinary.
Right, and connecting, the point you have brought up with our in this discussion and the previous one. So, do you think MI6 is cooperating with Ukraine in this matter, but Russia has yet to reveal that.
Well, the MI6, it's no secret that MI6 has been deeply involved in various acts of sabotage and including, of course, involvement in the spiderweb attack, drone attack on Russian strategic bombers at various locations from Murmansk to Irkutsk. The MI6 has been working hand in glove with Ukrainian intelligence. What strikes me and what touched off my suspicion that this issue, this attack on the general, was bigger than just the Ukrainian attack, is the sophistication we see, the logistics. The man was spirited out to Dubai, and what would happen next? I assume that there were plans to change his identity, maybe to have cosmetic surgery. In simple language, to make him unidentifiable.
Yes.
Would be beyond the capabilities of the Ukrainians.
So now going back to the raging war, do you think all of this and the continuing war from both sides, Ukraine and Russia, are they changing their strategy now?
The Russian strategy is the same as it's been. It's just the opportunity before them is far improved. Everyone commented on how this was going back 2 years, how this was a stalemate. The Russians, after all, made so little progress, going from 19% of Ukrainian territory occupied to 20% over the course of 3 years. And now it's accelerated because what held up Russian advances was the 8 years long constructed defensive positions. These are concrete bunkers and all kinds of defenses that made the number of cities in Ukraine on the eastern front close to the border with the Russian-backed forces of Donetsk and Lugansk. It made them impregnable. And it was astonishing to American experts that Russians captured these, but after very big efforts. Those cities are now in Russian hands. There are only 2 towns of lesser importance that remain to be conquered, and which the Russians are now closing in on. These are Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. And so the Russians are not changing their tactics, but they're changing the speed with which they move because the opposition is so weakened. The fortifications which the Ukrainian armies occupied have been lost. Therefore, it is entirely foreseeable that in a matter of several months, the Russians will reach the Dnieper River. And this, I think, is the explanation for Zelensky's and Trump's insistence on negotiating quickly, getting it over with, before there's nothing to negotiate over, since the Russians will have captured the whole of the Donbass.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Gilbert Doctorow for joining us and sharing that insight with us. Thank you very much. Now we are moving to our next news. South Korea's financial watchdog has called for tougher cryptocurrency regulations following a nearly $40 billion giveaway linked to a digital asset platform. Authorities say the incident exposed major gaps in oversight and raised concerns over investor protection and market stability. The watchdog has urged stronger safeguards, clearer disclosures, and tighter supervision of crypto operations to prevent similar episodes in the future. South Korea's call for stronger cryptocurrency regulations reflects a widespread concerns over the growing risks in the digital asset market. As authorities look to implement tougher measures to close gaps in oversight and ensure greater transparency, it remains to be seen whether these efforts will be enough to restore confidence and stabilize the market in the long run. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news and updates from around the world.